Hello again. So I wanted to tell you something that I promised I would do in the video that I made in Kremenchuk in the Peace Park several months ago. I talked about indoctrination, how the current day Russians equate the Soviet Union, the Soviet regime with themselves, which is extremely problematic. And it is also the cause of why they look negatively towards Bandera, who was fighting against the Soviet regime for Ukraine, but also against the Nazis. And they then simplify it by making it look like he was a Nazi because he was fighting the Soviets, which is complete nonsense. But this simplistic manipulation is what you see all the time with Russia. The manipulation is so stupid, you just have to wonder, why does anyone fall for it? But they do. Someone recently emailed me about a friend of his who was also indoctrinated into believing all this Russian bullshit. And he just wonders, why, how? The same as I was wondering about with my friends that I met originally in Kharkov, was it 2016 or 17, who went to Russia, and he quickly got indoctrinated with all the Russian bullshit. It's strange how that happens. But okay, I will go into that a little bit more. So this is the woman that I mentioned in this video who was suddenly very negative about Ukraine. It wasn't before that, before the takeover, the Russian takeover, and that fake referendum. I will tell you a little bit. I will read a little bit. You can read it if you want completely. I would say, after the Crimea was gifted as a grab back to Ukraine in 1954, people didn't feel much difference because we had been living in one country, not one country, but a union. But after Ukraine became independent 23 years ago, we felt it meant to be Ukrainian. Crimea have always been international pearl. Rising yourself up. Some narcissism here. Whatever. Frankly speaking, you can hear here with should be here to hear English here more often than Ukrainian. I don't know. I have not heard any Russian, English, or German. Yeah, German once, but it was someone, some student or something who went to visit a friend in a guest house where I stayed, and she spoke German with her friends who lived there. That's the only time. Yeah, one other guy. I talked to him. I tried in English. It was near the house or the residence of the Russian admiral and the Ukrainian admirals who were close together, those residences. And I talked to this guy who came out. I think I asked maybe for directions or something. And he didn't talk English, but he could speak German. And it is very difficult. It's still very difficult. It was very difficult then, especially everywhere, to find anyone who speaks English. So you can find people more likely to find English than Ukrainian. Maybe. I think you probably won't hear both in general. In any case, for 23 years, our memory didn't give a signal that we were Russian, despite the fact that 90% speaks and think they're Russian here. Yeah, but also Crimea voted to be with Ukraine and not Russia. That's what she conveniently forgets. After Western UA has revealed their Nazi nature, bullshit, it is indoctrinated nonsense. After they proclaimed Bandera a hero, he was because he defended the Ukrainians against the Soviet oppressors. But the strange thing is, as I mentioned in that video from Kremenchuk from Peace Park, is that the current day Russians equate the Soviet times with themselves. And of course, the Russians were the main parts of the Soviet Union. They decided on everything, had all the technology, the best land, etc. And yeah, but they did not what they didn't do is stated that Soviet regime was bad and that the actions of Bandera were against that regime and against people following these psychopathic leaders. And of course, that's completely justified to go against people who follow such a leader. That's their problem that they're following such Soviet leaders. They shouldn't have done that. That's very simple. After they called people who won Hitler Russian bastards, that is actually true. That's a very negative attitude of Americans. I saw it in a war film long ago, and I thought, yeah, that's incredibly crude, and it gives a response. But anyway, doesn't matter for the rest. Those who were shooting in the backs of my grandfather to be heroes, blah blah blah. After declared online they were hanging all Russian-speaking inhabitants who are not going to admit them. Authorities, discontent of Russians, I don't know what she's exactly saying. Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, stupid. That's because of her way of writing. She mentioned a bit earlier that she hadn't spoken a lot of or written a lot of English, and I think she must have used a dictionary or something and looked up words and said, oh yes, these are okay, but they're not okay, and it just gives a really weird feel of some sentences, a bit pompous, and things just don't make sense sometimes. Anyway, doesn't matter. I saw those happy faces during the voting. Sure you did. You see some happy faces, but you didn't see the faces of people who got forced into voting or not voting against the Russians. I saw people laughing, kissing streets, blah, blah, blah. The first time in 23 years I saw and feels the joy of happiness, realizing at least who they are as a nation. Yeah, who they are as a nation. Let's talk about the Tatars, who most of them got deported by Stalin to wherever, and who were really more of the original inhabitants. This is all bullshit from recent times, and then they say, well, does not apply because we were always Russians. No, you weren't. It wasn't Russian. It mentions economy. It goes without saying. It doesn't go without saying. It was very similar. The economics. It was slightly better in Russia than in Ukraine, but only in the big cities and only because of the wealth from oil and gas, etc. So-called UA destroyed Crimea. No, complete rubbish. They turned all Union resorts into shabby countryside. Rubbish. They turned the whole Ukraine. Blah blah blah. The granary of the former Soviet Union into beggar who ask money to buy bread. No. Ridiculous. We've been living in a circus named Ukraine. I think circus without the I. Without being able to dare to dream back to. You can go home to Russia, but Crimea cannot just go back to Russia because of international law, because it influences the country that it leaves. It's the same as the Netherlands. Netherlands would not just allow, for example, the province of Friesland to become separate or to be part of Germany, for example. Just is not possible because it influences the rest of the country in various ways, including economically. Therefore, in international law, it's not just possible to do that. And it makes complete sense. And then here we go. I show the her antisocial nature. So she pretends she was looking about religion. She found Jesus, blah blah blah. But she's really antisocial. The same as with these groups like Hare Krishna, which did a lot of damage. I watched a documentary about it recently, and of course, was it the Jim Jones who went to Guyana, or the followers of Osho, Bhagwan Rajneesh, extremely destructive. Why? Extremely destructive they were as a group. And yeah, it's like the people who are supposedly looking to do something good are some of the worst people you can find. It's weird. But let's look at what she says. Even kijken. Oh yeah, here. Some people, let's call them people on default. By default, she means let's call them people because they're not people. That's what she's saying. Being paid, decided to seize the reins, to make an orange terror. This is complete bullshit. There were people standing up against the people in power who were taking all the money. Let's you can have a look at that palace that was shown. This idiot who was in that side at the time in charge had built something for almost $1 billion or something, completely wasting money of a poor country. Unacceptable. A complete piece of shit, that guy. So of course there's going to be protests. To make they're lucky enough. What's going on is a total hell. No, and it's going to be much worse, only because of Russia. The only thing that they didn't expect are Russian people in Crimea who didn't forget totally World War II and Hitler. It's complete bullshit. It's indoctrination. So this is about Bandera, etc. So if you're interested, read this book, Jonathan Dimbleby, Russia, Journey to the Heart of a Land and Its People. Or watch the video, the TV series. This book, the TV series, shows you what people think. So there's a hankering back towards the Soviet times because they felt in that time we had status. And it was the TV series, I think, from 2008. Let's see, what is the date of the book? What does it say here? 2008 as well is the book. No, 2000. Yeah. So 2008, but it's researched earlier, of course, so probably the videos were from 2007, and there were people in St. Petersburg that he interviewed who wanted to go back to Soviet times, Soviet Union times. Yeah, also looking more positively towards the Soviet leaders, etc. There's a problem there in Russia, obviously, and what I mentioned is that there was a conflation of Soviet times and current times. There was no distinction being made between the leaders at the time who caused problems and against whom people like Bandera were rising up. They were not rising up against the average Russian, but against those leaders who forced those average Russians to fight against them. So, let's see, what else? And here, this is like pompous, but also stupid at the same time. But those dastardly, villainous, false to the core mutts, again being negative about Ukrainians, try to prove that white is black and sometimes they're lucky. This is all complete bullshit, but that's the end of Ukraine. It had never been a country. Bullshit. Ukraine was there before Russia. Ukraine is the progenitor. Russia came later in culture and everything. It's a set of West which dream about Europe, blah blah blah, because no things. So Crimea and East were feeding them. Crimea and East of Ukraine were not feeding the rest of Ukraine. That's bullshit. And the East, which produces everything for sale and no things. So Crimea and East of which produces everything for sale and feed who craves for Russia. Sadly, but now the East is strangulated and have to stay within that piece of shit, I think she means. But I believe that's not for a long time. We will see. The Putler has completely destroyed that region and sacrificed hundreds of thousands of Russians, including a lot of the Russians who lived there. So, Yeah, you got your freedom in death. The example of Crimea has shown that millions of people don't have to stay slaves of several people who think they're gods. This is also this is complete and utter bullshit. The only results of your independence of Crimea is Crimeans. Peaceful, welcome everyone, Crimeans. Yeah, sure they were peaceful. They were forcing you to vote a certain way. Appear to hate everything that reminds them of you. Blah, blah, blah. It's incredible, but it gives everything turned to data. Blah, blah, blah. Everything that concerns you, you calls idiosyncrasis. Here, whatever. Being part of Ukraine means for us. Being part of blah, blah, blah. Again, negative. I was really happy. The bandits were crying in their Maidan. We're still dreaming of speaking Russian. Completely antisocial. I felt sick almost reading this email when I got it. And she sent one other that she said she would, but it's not really interesting. And I never wrote to her again after this. Yes. This is it. This is the example I mentioned and that I would show at some point, that I would look up. When I was at the Peace Park talking about indoctrination, this is a really good example. And this book and the TV series, if you want to look it up, it's very, very interesting to see, especially that section about the Russians craving back to Soviet times. Okay, that's it for now. Bye.